So we heard a number of summaries. Right now we're going to transition to a new topic. We heard about incorporating AI into your business, the imperative of AI into your business. I'd love to welcome ANNABEL, GILLARD, and the rest of the next panel up to the stage, taking it beyond just incorporating into our business, but how do we actually make it work for us and create security for our businesses? So without further ado, let me hand it over, and I'll let you introduce and invite your panel to the stage.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Eric. Delighted to be here, and thank you for the invitation to join. Especially what I love about the way you frame this, Eric, is in a trust-first capacity, that before we think about anything with AI, we need to be thinking about how to use it responsibly and how to build trust amongst our stakeholders. It's my great privilege to introduce a fantastic panel here. I'm very humbled by who I'm going to be joined by. So first up, may I invite Alex back to the back to the stage. You've just heard. Alex is a seasoned tech entrepreneur with a background in technology platforms and work tech, having founded the IT job board in 1999 and turned it into Europe's largest tech careers platform before its successful sale. She is now working on her latest company, Autometry, which is an AI technology company dedicated to transforming recruiter productivity. And she's an angel investor to boot. Tim, please join us. Tim runs DLA Ignite, the world's leading social media strategy and social selling consultancy, and he's authored 3 books on selling and marketing and runs a podcast and has numerous other initiatives, very broad-ranging. And then Sarah, may I ask you to join us as well? Sarah is a research fellow at UCL with a focus on preempting crime and security risks. Her research background is in neuropsychology and social engineering, and she has a forthcoming book on the psychological factors that affect cybersecurity. And in fact, this very week, I'm delighted to announce, she received an award from UCL's CISO for research on phishing attacks that bridges academia and practice. So congratulations, Sarah. And I should probably also mention, the reason I'm here is because although I'm recovering from a career in financial services, ethics has always been a side hustle, and then 5 years ago I decided to go pro, because I think AI ethics is the future to building trusted technology. As we go through this technological revolution, the way we can stay human-centered and build trust is all around ethics, I think. So I should declare that bias up front. Brilliant. So,
well done.
Panel, can we start off by defining our terms maybe, and just thinking about what does business responsibility, what does resilience look like to you, and then how AI perhaps affects that position. Does anyone want to kick us off with that one?
Thank you, and welcome everybody, and thank you for attending today. I think that AI provides us with a responsibility. And a responsibility not just for shareholders but for stakeholders as well. The thing about AI is that it magnifies everything. So that if we're in a situation where we're not being ethical, then it basically magnifies that. So we have to be really, really key to see how we use the AI to make sure that we're on point and we're doing the right thing.
Brilliant, thank you. There's another
Try
one.
this one.
Is that one all right? That one working.
Hello.
There we go.
Yes.
I'm going to put this one down. I mean, everyone's going to be bored to tears of me by the end of the day, but I've sort of talked about my background in technology around the world of work. So there's a lot of ethics in that. Mm-hmm. It's one of the key areas around one of the hotspots that AI can really sort of have a profoundly big positive effect or a profoundly big negative effect. So, for me, ethics in and how responsibly AI is used is key in my industry, absolutely key. With or without governance, it's really, really important, yes.
Yeah, in the last panel you spoke about bias. Is that one of the areas where you see there being the biggest kind of risks ethically, or are there other areas that you worry about?
Bias is a big one, and transparency around decision-making is another, because for me they're slightly different. But from a bias perspective, I mean, we chatted about this previously, and everyone assumes that, AI is going to be terrible in a way because it's going to make decisions and it will be biased. But actually, over the past 10, 15 years, we've all used the internet to find jobs. And actually, candidates have been stuffing their CVs with words to make themselves look better for decades. And, you know, people who hire people have been stuffing their adverts with words to make themselves appear, you know, a more desirable prospect than they are. So this has been around for a while, this using technology to gain an advantage on both sides. It isn't new to my world. But you're right, you know, the ability for that to be so much exponentially bigger is such a worry that yes.
A CV is just a list of lies anyway, isn't it?
My CTO calls it candidate claims. He doesn't actually, you know, we're trying to sort of, there are some real positives with AI in the world of matching candidates to jobs, because at the moment, humans make decisions on whether a candidate is good for a job. Humans innately biased, right? The technology makes decisions, and they're based on a few keywords matching in the right part of the document. That's not great either. But what AI has, which is better than these two, is it is actually very good at looking at context. So AI should be an improvement on this. An AI can look at the context of a big pot of data on the job and the candidate. I'm very positive about the fact that AI could do a superlatively good job at finding candidates for roles that would have been overlooked previously. So there is an upside here, not just a downside, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. Sorry, Gavin.
Can I just quickly comment on AI in decision-making in different contexts? So we recently concluded a project on social robots. You can regard that as a special form of AI as well. In fact, the social functionality of robots that will be roaming around in our daily lives is largely provided by AI. And now a lot of these social robots are actually deployed in healthcare settings. And what we found as one of the results in our research is that actually people might want to have the right to have a human make a decision for them when it comes to healthcare context, instead of a robot doing that for them.
Well, that reminds me a little of another comment in the last panel about thinking about a digital workforce and a human workforce, and actually getting the balance right between that, and how far that's possible from a customer or a stakeholder to decide, and how far that's decided by the company. Do you have a...
Yeah, can I just add something? Something that I think about when I use AI is that, and I've said this before, is that when I go and buy a packet of biscuits, I can see from the packet of biscuits that, that I understand the supply chain to it. There are single-use plastic being given out, and I don't use single-use plastic. I bring my own water bottle. So, you know, sustainability is really key. But when we actually place a prompt on ChatGPT or Gemini, we don't know what the supply chain and the sustainability implications are. We know that Microsoft are buying atomic power to run data centers. We could have a debate about the sustainability of that. And we know that you know, it takes a bottle of water to run a ChatGPT. It takes a kettle to boil a kettle to run a prompt on Google. But when I actually write a prompt, what is it doing to? What is the sustainability impact to what I'm doing? And that's what I want to know.
I'm really glad you brought up environmental sustainability, because there is a cost to all this fantastic AI innovation and all this new potential. And at the risk of having a slight pop at Angus, I think when we defer straight to AI, we sometimes aren't thinking about the environmental consequences of doing that, because obviously it's much more costly to run an AI model than it is to just run a Google search, for example. Do you think we know enough about the environmental impact of what we're doing with AI and our AI use?
Yeah, sure, I can comment on that. So as a crime scientist, I will probably be biased towards the risks and security implications of everything. But especially when it comes to AI, there are loads of studies that show that AI is very thirsty. Actually, Tim already alluded to this, that like you said, when you generate a prompt with ChatGPT, it costs about a bottle of water that potentially evaporates into the air to cool the data centers to actually generate that response. And in fact, there are projections that by 2027, so in 2 years from now, all of AI's demand for fresh water is going to be the same as half the population of the UK. So the question that we might want to be asking ourselves is, what is the cost of the convenience that AI brings to us?
And look, I think it's really, really an interesting one. And there are very few people talking about how enterprises can tackle getting the same results they get from AI, but using a different format of data to get there, because people are just seamlessly sort of jumping onto the AI tool first, right? But you can use AI to sort your data out first in a way that it's then better labeled to be interrogated by normal tech, which means you use the agent to label it, not every time you want to search it. But because that educational piece for enterprises isn't getting out, the default position, I use the agent every time, rather than I use the agent once, I use it to set my foundations up so that moving forward I can use just an algorithmic search rather than an AI search. So I think there's a piece of education here for enterprises, really.
Yeah, that's wonderful comment, and especially I think because, you know, we have this great tendency towards speed rather than the kind of intentionality that was referred to a little earlier about deciding actually what's the problem we're trying to solve, what's the objective we're seeking to achieve, and now what's the best way of getting there using the AI in a smart way rather than just, everyone's got AI, if I don't adopt it, I'll be out of business, and feeling this kind of existential threat. And I think businesses do have time to pause and think through what they're doing and be strategic about it. But I think there is a sense of, well, I perceive a sense of panic in the boardroom slightly, that we've got to get there before everybody else does, otherwise we've lost the race. Do you think that's, do you see that as well in your dealings with people, and are you worried about that, or do you think...
I just think there's a lack of knowledge on how to use AI full stop. So, you know, if the noise is AI can do these great things and it's about access to information, rather than AI can sort your systems out so you can, you know, you can catalog it better yourself. You know, there just isn't, I don't think it's as sexy. So cataloging your data isn't as exciting as using an agent. You know, it's just not. So you could have a dramatic impact if we educated people on AI to format the data rather than AI to give you the answer at the end.
I was given some advice at another AI event, which is if you're going to use AI, do the boring stuff first. Don't do stuff that does anything with customers. Because we've already seen the situation with Klarna where they sacked all the customer service staff, and then they went, oh, actually, we need to re-employ them. And so I think what we need to do is that most businesses are going to be retrofitting AI in some shape or form. Rather in the conversation we had before was that they're going to be AI-first startups. But in most cases, it's going to be retrofitted. And I think what we need to be doing is being really careful. And as Alex says, we need to think about the strategy and the purpose rather than the technology. I think, you know, there's a bit of a squirrel situation going on, and you know, oh, wow, there's a bit of technology, let's chase after it.
And you've got a background in talking about selling and marketing and building relationships of trust with customers. So is there a perspective there you'd like to bring?
I have, yes. I think that trust is really important. Someone said earlier on that trust isn't something that you can put in a PowerPoint presentation, and it's not. It's something that it takes a long time to build, and we can lose it in an instant. I think it's really difficult. I know some of the questions that we've got are around, we're going to be talking about deep fakes and truth and what is truth and what is trust. And trust is so important. And if you want to sell anything or you want to market anything, trust is actually more important than your brand or anything else.
Do you have a view on how you build trust?
Good question. Yeah, sitting on panels and stuff like that is a good way of doing it. Well, yes. I mean, you know, you've got to be trustworthy. And if you think about, you know, where do we find trust in people? We generally find it because we believe in what people say rather than what companies say. Because we know that what the company's going to say, they're going to say the same thing, which is buy my product because we're great. But if somebody else says it, if someone from the shop floor says it, I've just seen a note that Starbucks is going to get all of its baristas to basically post on social media. That's a brilliant idea. Because who do we trust? We trust the barista. We don't trust the CEO. And nobody, I mean, the CEO will put a video on YouTube, but nobody will watch it. A barista will basically put one up, and there'll be 1 million views.
If I can just comment on trust from a slightly psychological point of view. It usually consists of two elements that are really important for people to feel trust in anyone. It could be an organization, a person. So it's integrity, that you actually do what you say you're going to do and be consistent with that. And that, of course, takes time to build. And the second element is competence. You need well, when you say you're going to do something, you need to be able to do that.
So you can do it, and you do what you say you can. Yeah.
So I sort of add to that, I think, and your earlier comment about the sort of the robots and the healthcare and the caring, and some people wanting to have treatment from a human rather than a robot, which I think makes total sense. And I think that trust piece around AI is interesting because we all know that AI hallucinates, but we don't know when, and that's pretty challenging, and then you apply that to something specific like finding a job, or something as important as that, and you've got some real trust issues there, and then we'll see enterprises going back to more traditional systems. Well, some of the stuff that we need to work with is just binary information, and we shouldn't be giving it to an LLM because the binary, algorithmic stuff is good enough. We rely on the facts, and those facts are the things we use, not an agent inferring what they think it means. So, for me, trust and integrity and how we apply those principles to a technology system are difficult, especially when there's lots of data spread across in different places. But what we're playing with is having hybrid versions of technology where you use some algorithmic, where it's based on the actual facts, and binary, yes or no, does that piece of information exist and does it match? And some, agents making decisions, but within guardrails, if that makes sense.
It does. It sounds like it's more of an argument for more uses of narrow, quite specific AI rather than these broad-ranging models, because with the narrow ones, the competent side of it, and you can actually trust that it will do what you think it will do. Can we also touch on resilience, because you have this background with cyber and cybersecurity? How has that been affected by the developments of AI? Does it make us safer or less safe, or is that the wrong way of thinking about it?
That's such a huge topic in itself to discuss. AI, like Tim actually said, it allows us to scale everything, including criminal behavior. So, well, you might think of many, many legitimate cases of where we use AI to accelerate our businesses, but at the same time, cyber criminals are typically very opportunistic, and they will jump to new technologies faster than any other business out there. So, yes, we have seen an increase in more sophisticated phishing attacks, for instance, because it's so extremely easy to ask ChatGPT, can you make a convincing email for me that we're going to send to this specific CEO and pretend to be, I don't know, another executive assistant or someone else that's reputable. So in terms of resilience, I would say technology is always going to change, but what isn't going to change is the fact that we're human and that we have these psychological characteristics that make us human. And so it would be more helpful as businesses to really focus on those human factors to make us more resilient rather than only looking at the technology stack. So what that, for instance, could mean in practice is that you have to prepare people mentally for what are you going to do if your business operations are affected. For instance, we just had a major breach with M&S over the Easter weekend. It cost them about £300 million in market value. So how are you going to make sure that even though there's a cyber incident, you can still keep your business running? You have to ask yourself, what is my minimum viable business? What part can I absolutely not let down? And how to make then that as protected as possible. And often it comes down to fairly basic cybersecurity measures like encrypting your data, backing up, making sure you have channels to restore that data as soon as possible, even though you might be dealing with a ransomware attack, for instance.
That is so interesting. I mean, I see cybersecurity and cyber issues just shooting up the board agenda, left, right, and centre. But what I'm not seeing is that kind of emotional side of actually how do we prepare for this? What's our kind of game plan? What's the kind of resilience planning within our workforce? You deal with many companies. Is that something that you've seen or people are recruiting for?
Well, by the way, that M&S example was a great one, and I think M&S is a very beloved brand in the UK. And I think there for all of us, we're like, gosh, that could happen to any company. company. And I think retailers are a funny segment because I don't think, even though retailers are big e-commerce people online, I'm not sure as an industry they're as hot on their technology and cyber as other industries are, right? But I can imagine there were a huge amount of retail CTOs for the last few months that haven't slept much, right? Because that was horrifying for them, and I'm really glad that they're back on their feet. You know, I've previously run big job board businesses and big recruitment businesses, and the amount of personal data that we look after is huge. Someone's CV says so much about them. It's you know, such a massive responsibility to carry that kind of data, right? So we have to have really, really good views on this and structures. But I mean, I've got an example from yesterday. Everybody's tinkering with AI as a consumer, and that's good. So how can I be more productive at work? And we're all on Slack, and suddenly Notion has been invited as a team member to Slack because somebody in the teams thought, oh, look, I can plug it in and it can do something clever. Right. And my CTO's going crazy. It's like, you've just opened a door to that, you know, that is terribly, you know, dangerous from a security breach, but on the surface looked like an innocent thing to do. You know, my team member thought he was doing something very, very sort of productive. And I think the AI seams that plug the systems together, the MCP layer, is going to be where we're going to have a lot of issues in the next few months, because everyone's playing with sticking it together. And for me, those, you know, my old CTO used to say, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And he's quite right. You're going to have security breaches just by very innocent individual user errors could take down a whole company. You'd be really surprised.
Yes, that's back to education, isn't it? Sorry, did you?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. I think that's a great example. And I think in terms of cybersecurity threats and incidents, we often are focused on the financial impact on businesses. But it's much wider than that. When you're dealing with a lot of personal data, for instance, and you have a data breach, there will be lawsuits against you because people say, oh, you leaked my data somewhere. The Data Protection Authority is going to get to you, and reputational damage, and so forth and so on.
And just to say that Sarah has a book coming out. Do you want to just mention it?
Thank you for plugging it.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, it's called The Psychology of Cybersecurity, Hacking and the Human Mind. So we look at how do hackers think, why do they hack people and organizations, how do people defend their organizations, but specifically what psychological factors affect people when they do these things. So what drives hackers, or what cognitive biases affect people working in cybersecurity, because often they're very pressured, high stress environments. And then we have some tips for people just to defend themselves in their day-to-day lives, as well as CISOs how to deal with the psychological pressure. Thanks for that. Commercial is over now.
Well, in different ways, you've all got professional interests in helping people, working people fulfill their potential. Can I ask each of you how you think AI will affect that?
I'd like to pick up on the previous panel, which was talking about AI teammates. And you mentioned it, Alex, didn't you? In terms of businesses need to look at both human team members and AI team members. And that, I think, is something that's quite new and revolutionary for people. We've just designed an AI salesmate, and it's amazing the way that it's actually, we're just using it internally at the moment, but it's amazing. What we decided was that if you've got AI, it will take you from 0 to average. So we were thinking, so how can you go from average to good or to excellent? So my French guy basically turns up on Monday to a meeting that we've got. He said, I wasn't doing much at the weekend, my partner was away, so I made this teammate. And it's just amazing what you can do. And I think that's something that we really need to take that into and understand that it's not just going to be an org chart of people, it's going to be an org chart of people and AI.
So we've played around with an industry that's very sort of manual, which is recruitment. Lots of people still pressing buttons. And we've looked at what parts of their role can a piece of AI do better, and can we make it seamless into their workflow? Because what we're not about is building I guess, lots of autonomous digital workers. We want digital workers that sort of augment the human worker. Because for me, that's the win. Augmented humans rather than really separated teams. Yeah. So that human in the loop makes a really big difference. And the areas I think that productivity is going to shoot up in is the tasks where they rely on lots of data being manipulated very quickly. So searching for a candidate for a job, an agent can do better. I actually think quite a lot of lead gen for business development, if you plug the right data set in with the right behavioral signals, an agent could be better. But then that's giving the human time to train the agent to do it the way they want, the market they want, you know, the type of candidate they want, but gives them more high quality time to do the work that humans should do, which is time with the client, time with the candidate. So I think that's, for me, there are huge productivity wins on tasks that involve lots of data, manipulating of data. That makes sense?
Yeah, super interesting.
And are we actually seeing that happen? Or it was one of the things there have been some studies that suggest that sometimes when we bring AI into the process, we actually start checking out as humans. So rather than using the extra time or the extra insights to actually improve our work, we just sort of defer to the AI and then gradually lose those skills.
The biggest challenge for me is convincing the people to change the process to let the AI in, for sure, right? So, you know, I've got one company that are a big recruitment agency. They have 110,000 CVs coming in a month, and the humans are screening them yes or no. So 40% of those CVs are irrelevant, but a human's going, no, that's not relevant. So it's 1,800 man-hours a month spent on going, is that, I mean, an AI could do the first sift for them, and they could then spend time on just the good ones. You know, and you think, but weirdly, wresting control of that off a group of humans is harder than it sounds. So you're right, there is a trust issue at the moment for humans to give up parts of their job to an AI agent, even if the AI agent will potentially be a lot better at it, because that feels quite risky.
Well, maybe because they might be so much better at it.
It feels quite risky. So I kind of understand why, you know, there's a, but that is going to happen, you know, we are going to move that way. So as enterprise companies, we've got to figure out how we shift productivity in a positive way for humans rather than a negative way, I think.
So I'm old enough to remember the synthesizer being invented in the 1980s, and that was going to kill music. Because you could press a key and you'd have strings and et cetera, and in fact it's probably advanced music and accelerated it. And I think that there will be people, because there are people that have already taken AI and said, I'm going to use AI, I'm going to spam out as many emails as I can, because we spend all our days basically trying to get rid of those things. And so there will be people that will try to kill it. But I think that there's a great opportunity as well. You know, we can write a prompt. And so a friend was telling me that the government produced a paper recently about they're going to spend 200 million on training. He has a training company. He knows that won't work. So he got ChatGPT to basically, he said he put the white paper into ChatGPT and say, what's the gap in this? And how does it apply to what you know about me? And then write a letter to the Prime Minister, and it did that. And then he DHL'd it to 10 Downing Street and all of the tech leaders as well. It cost him £200 to DHL all the letters. But you know, it's an opportunity to. It's just an example as an opportunity of a way that we can actually use it and use it to do something that we never could have done before, or we didn't ever have the time to do before. There will be people that automate, yeah, I know that, but there is an opportunity for us as well to do things that we never thought of.
100% agree with that. I mean, in my more hopeful moments, I think, you know, this is in almost every area of work, you think, oh, there's so many ways we could do this better. And if I was starting with a blank sheet of paper, you wouldn't design it like this. AI is that blank sheet of paper. We have a moment in time to reimagine how we would do most of the things and how we could do them better. But I do think it comes down to trust, because do the people in our businesses think that's what business is trying to do, or do they think they're just trying to do everything as cheaply as possible and hollow out the human in it? So I think we have have some fundamental, this is much too big for this panel, or even one day, I think, but we have some fundamental questions about what we value and how we decide what matters in our organisations and in our societies, and how the economics of that get shared, which, as I say, is too big a question, although if anyone wants to have a go at what is truth as an alternative, feel free. Have you looked at the kind of psychological factors around this when you've looked at your hacking work? Is there something related to trust there, or are they different drivers?
Could you repeat the question?
I was wondering if when you looked at the psychological factors around the people who misuse the technology and who are seeking to kind of hollow out our businesses, what's driving that? What are the factors that drive that?
Yeah, great question. There's a multitude of factors. So there are both personal things as well as environmental things. So starting with the environmental things is that a lot of hackers actually nowadays are relatively young, men, boys, in their teenage years who might feel bored. They might not necessarily have a big network of friends at school, and they are not necessarily supervised by their parents very well, because actually the parents are very happy that they are being quiet in their rooms and working on their computers. So it's very easy for someone then to go on the internet, go on the dark web and check out, hey, what is this hacking about? Can I do something like that? So that's one very clear driver for people to get into that sort of context. Personal drivers could be that a lot of these cybercriminals that become, let's say, professional cybercriminals for the longer term, is that they are really fascinated by how do systems work, how does a computer actually function the way it does. So one way of finding out how a system works is by being able to break it. So this is what Kevin Mitnick, for instance, said about himself. He was really fascinated to learn the ins and outs of how, for instance, in his earlier years, how telephone networking systems worked. And then, well, the rest is history in his case. Yeah, many different things. But nowadays, when we quickly touch on the gender disparity in this field, there are a very small number of women hackers as well. And we tend to see that they are more ideologically driven compared to the sort of drivers that we associate with men. So, for instance, they might be, I don't know, just an example, Democratic, and they want to get it out on the Republicans, or they might be from a certain Middle Eastern country, and they want to get it out on certain Western countries, and so forth.
Wow, that's fascinating. So, we touched on there aren't enough women in AI, but that's...
It's even worse in cybersecurity.
They're all hackers.
Well, the statistic I heard yesterday is about 15%, 1/5 of AI workforce is female. So we do. There's definitely an underrepresentation. Are there any other kind of human considerations that you think about in terms of responsible business and development of AI? Things like, well, on both sides, we've talked a lot about the opportunities of, freeing up time and productivity, but there are issues around the labour supply chains that we haven't quite touched on, like forced labour or some of the things that happen in different parts of the world.
I think there's been an example of people using forced labour or something like that to do something with unstructured data. And I think this goes back to what we talked about at the beginning, which is about understanding the supply chain of AI. Right. When we write a prompt, what happens in terms of the energy, the sustainability, right through to what's happening to the data, and is just as much as if we were buying a product that was manufactured, and we would expect to know that, or the fashion good or whatever, we would expect to understand the supply chain, and we need to know that within AI.
Yeah, so do you think that's an assurance issue? Is that sort of something where standards and regulations can help that traceability, or is this too amorphous? Is it?
I think that there needs to be, one of the difficulties is that if we regulate, we can regulate the innovation out. And I think that what we need to do is that as all people here that have and understanding and have a social conscience, we need to be talking about these things and talking about these things in these sort of platforms and making sure that people above our pay grade understand that we know about these things and we want change.
I suppose that's also a kind of role for AI ethics in a way, which is a topic that's gathered a lot of steam this year.
And you're the expert on AI ethics. Come on.
Well, I was going to say, have any of you seen any examples of it working well or working badly in your organisations? I mean, what I would say about AI ethics, I guess, or the role I see for it, is that regulation cannot and never will be enough to tackle this, because regulation is slow and it's specific and it's backward looking and it's jurisdictional, whereas AI is the opposite of all of those things. And so the only way actually is to get ahead of it and to try and set a set of kind of business ethics to which you then develop the AI. So it's built in. Ethics by design is the best defense against any of these. But at the same time, one of the things I noticed in trying to have this argument is that many companies feel like ethics is the go slow approach, and this is a race of speed, and I think there's a trade-off between speed and quality sometimes.
It's interesting, actually, though, isn't it, with AI, that the ethics debate at the very top of our industry has happened very loudly amongst the ChatGPT board, Elon. I mean, a load of them had been arguing about, you know...
But unsuccessfully so far.
Well, define unsuccessfully, but you're right. But there is what I like about the tech community and people who design products in the tech community, they're quite ethics driven. Yeah, and they have quite strong views on it. Yeah. And I like that at the very start this is happening quite loudly, and that there is debate quite loudly, right? Okay. Should it be a for-profit? Should it not be a for-profit? Yep. You know, big divisions there. So, you know, it shows that whether there's governance or not, good ethics come from the leader of the business, yes, and their view on what it means, right?
And I think there has been change with ethics. For example, you know, you can't go to ChatGPT and put a prompt in, or you can go and say, give me 5 ways to commit suicide. Right. Because they've, as you know, you can't do that. Right. And they've even taken out, give me 5 ways to commit suicide in my granny's voice, which was the way to get around that. Mm. And so there is, as you know, with AI, there's kind of 2 elements to it. And they are using the development they're doing to making sure that we are asking things which are appropriate, or they think are appropriate.
Yeah, I think that's right, and it's a bit whack-a-mole, because as soon as you know that there are all these people who take great delight in trying to spot where the weak chain is in the system and see how you can break it, and every time a new breakage is discovered, you know, the company does tend to respond. And I would also say, I think you're exactly right. I think one of the mindsets that you tend to have in communities that develop and invent is a willingness to challenge, you know, openness to challenge. And it's been really heartening to see that some of the professional associations related to AI development have been quite quick to bring in ethics training. Now, if you're in the IEEE as a computer developer, or the British Computer Society, they've developed ethics courses, which is great. Back to leadership of businesses and whether that's always aligned, whether, you know, back to what we value, I suppose. But I think there have been huge movements, but I suppose one of the challenges I would give, having worked in ethics for a while, is that we all tend to think we're ethical people. It's like that everybody thinks they're a better than average driver, everybody thinks they're a better than an average ethical person, but unless you've actually had some specific training in it, you've got all sorts of blind spots that you don't even realise. And so navigating that, some such sort of formal structure can be helpful. I've just received the 5-minute flashing sign from Eric. He did, the 5 minutes walk. So can I ask you all to conclude either by giving us one suggestion for the audience to take into their businesses about how they can boost their business sense of trust or the opportunity for resilience, or if you prefer to make a totally different comment, please feel free to do so.
Yeah, I can start. I would say, given the rapid advances of AI, you have to take cybersecurity seriously. Of course, I'm a bit biased here, but I really believe that. Often when I talk with CISOs, for instance, they will tell you the CEO or leaders of an organization really have to make cybersecurity a priority, because it's not a tick-in-a-box exercise. And this is the sort of culprit here, where you might say, as an organization, look, we have this beautiful, shiny ISO certificate where we check all the boxes. But when you, for instance, look at cybersecurity training and awareness, which is recommended by the ISO 7000 standard, you can implement that, but is it actually effective? We see in 15 years of CISO experience in UCL, for instance, in this case, every time we send a simulated phishing email to employees, 10 to 20% of employees will always click on it. So what's the point of doing cybersecurity training? Is it just not effective? Is it not engaging? Is it because people just don't actually do the training, but just play the videos on the background and do something else? So we have to rethink that.
I'm going to be very dry and talk about, because it was ethics and sustainability, wasn't it, we started off with. So I think from a sustainability perspective, and I know that we all run, commercial organisations, but from a sustainability perspective, I think the idea of being very thoughtful about our use in agents and how that impacts, our footprint on the world, because I do think some thoughtfulness around how we use it to set our data foundations up can make a massive difference in this. So I know it's quite a dry point, but I think it's significant in its impact. If all enterprises really thought through when they need to use AI and when they don't, it would have a huge impact.
My point would be storytelling. I think it's very easy to we seem to be taught at school or somewhere along the lines where we get taught facts and we live the world of facts. And people don't actually learn by facts, they learn through stories. And if we're going to change culture in our organization, we need to be doing that through stories and changing the narrative. What I've done in my company is I'm a great believer in culture and an innovation culture. And that doesn't start from, well, the culture starts from me as a CEO, but it also comes from the bottom upwards. So rather than telling everybody, like a couple of CEOs, was it Shopify and a couple of CEOs basically said, you must do AI. It's the wrong thing to do. You've got to create a narrative and a discussion going in your organization, and it's got to come from the top, and it's got to come from the bottom as well. And the way that you do that is through sharing information, not by holding it in, and by creating a story and a narrative rather than, you must do this and here are the facts. And look at, M&S shut down for 4 weeks because of it. Nobody cares. Or they won't listen, which is, it's the way that you talk to people and the way that you get things over to people.
What a wonderful point to end on. So the key to business resilience is to be intentional and sustainable in our use of it, and to lean into what makes us human and builds trust and takes people on the journey rather than relying on old, obscure, unsuccessful ways of training people. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Can I invite you all to thank the panel in the usual way?
Annabelle, thank you.